Hi, everybody. My name's Dan. I'm an engineer on the community team here at Datadog, and I've had the pleasure and the honor of working with Vandana on this talk. It really has been a fun ride. I have learned so much working with Vandana, and I hope that you got something equally valuable from that talk as well. Before we dive into the Q&A, Vandana, would you like an opportunity to say hello to our audience today?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to my talk. It was wonderful to speak at Dash Conference and connect with all of you. I hope you liked my talk and connect with me afterwards. So I look forward to hearing from all of you around the feedback, any inputs that you have around my presentation. I'm there on Twitter with the name InfoSec Vandana. If you look for Vandana Verma, you'll see me on LinkedIn as well. So please feel free to reach out to me. I look forward to it.
She's not joking, by the way. I've had some great conversations with her so far. And again, just really a fantastic learning experience. So we do have the Q&A panel on the stage. If you have questions from the chat, or if you have questions as we move through the Q&A, please do use the Q&A tab. That's what I am looking at. We're going to be asking these questions here live, and we'll just get that discussion going. So we already have a couple of good questions here. So really one question I think is a good question to sort of start off with. And it comes from the poll, actually, that we were running during the course of this presentation. Are you familiar with OWASP, right? Have you heard of it? Do you follow the top 10 in other publications? And so the question is, if this is your first time you've ever heard of OWASP, or maybe you've heard the acronym before but didn't know what it was, what's a good place to get started on the journey with OWASP?
I would say the best place to start off with the website itself, owasp.org. Now, when you land there, all the details are listed from projects to chapters to anything that is there with OWASP. Like I'm on the global board of directors, so if you go to the board, you'll see me listed as a vice chair. What are the bylaws? How the community engagement happens? If you want to be a chapter leader, you can apply for it. Now, if you see that there's no chapter near you within the 50 miles, you can just go ahead and apply for one. And it's a super easy process. The team would work with you to set up everything from Meetup to your accounts. If you want to be a project leader or contribute to a project, you can just go to the GitHub of that respective project and contribute. And contribution, I don't mean that you have to do it via the code itself. You can do it via the language changes. Any specific implementation that you feel that should be there with that particular product or project, please do that. Another important aspect is that wherein you can share your feedback inputs around the enhancements. That's also very helpful. And like I said in the presentation, that when we talk about open source is where the people are spending their valuable time apart from their family, from their office work. So it's important to have as many hands which are there. So please do contribute to these projects. And I'm sure there would be one project which will interest you the most. So you can just go to GitHub and start contributing, or you can reach out to the leaders as well, or even you can start your own project as well.
And that's the beautiful thing about open source, right? You can start your own project as well, get people on board, contribute, freely and liberally. And I think that's actually quite an exciting aspect of OWASP, right? Is that it's an open community, and people from all over the world are participating. It's very, very exciting. All right, so let's get into the details, right? Into the nitty gritty with the Q&A here. A question from Suella. There have been, frankly, a number of high-profile vulnerabilities with compromised NPM packages in recent weeks. Do you have any recommendations with regards to security tools to scan for these vulnerabilities, or what can we be doing within our organizations to try to prevent, mitigate the risk from compromised NPM packages?
So if I talk about the compromised packages, the one most important thing is to keep a list of it. There are many times we download these packages from the internet and we tend to miss on tracking them. So the one important aspect is let's track them. Documentation is very, very important. Now, another aspect is if I say that we need to have uh, like a sort of a software bill of material where we can track each of the changes. And while we are using this open source components, like I said, with great power comes great responsibility. So the most important thing to remember is that keep it up to date. In the demo, I could share some of the aspects, but think about if your developer ecosystem is breached, what will you do? Now, to start off, what we can do is keep our softwares up to date, like we do it with our phones. So I am really paranoid about security, so you will see me keeping my things up to date, keeping my devices up to date. And it's basically a hygiene for yourself, like we use clean clothes, we use toothbrushes, and all of that. When we do that, it is also important when we have our devices on our hands and using them day in and day out. So keep them up to date. And with these dependencies, there are so many in a project that sometimes we lose the track of it. There are many open source components which are there, open source tools which are there, which I'm going to suggest, like dependency check or dependency track. These two tools are amazing. Like you can just go to OWASP.org and look for it. And there will be few things which you might need to fine tune based on your need, but they can actually help you to get started, to have a benchmark that what are the dependencies which are part of the ecosystems, which are licenses which are going to be expiring soon, or which are the outdated versions that we are using, and from which vendor are we using, what version should be we using. So all of these things you can start leveraging from the open source tool. And once you have a baseline set, you understand, okay, these are the things that are needed. And now after that, you can go ahead and go for a commercial tool, because now you've understood your appetite, you understood your environment well, and then commercial tool uh, totally adds on to it. But I would say that here at the conference, I'm not going to be taking any name, but there are so many software composition analysis tools which exist in the market, which you can try based on the need that you have or the kind of requirements that you have. And I hope this answers your question.
I'm sure it does, and in fact, it segues perfectly into the follow-up question that this individual had, which was, are there any OWASP tools to benchmark software composition analysis tools themselves?
Absolutely. Like I said, that OWASP has dependency check, OWASP has dependency track. But now, if I talk about software bill of materials, there is one amazing project that we have is called Cyclone DX, which guides through it, which is sort of a benchmark and a standard. Now that is there, and then there is a project called OWASP Benchmark in itself, which uses certain languages. So probably you can actually try that, and it's going to be helpful, really helpful. And Cyclone DX has just been promoted to be a flagship project, because it's helping the whole industry and helping a lot of organizations who want to keep up with the software bill of materials, software supply chain, that I should say.
Excellent. So you used a word there, flagship. What does flagship mean in this context?
So flagship, I mean that that's been very well recognized in the industry. People are using it, people are leveraging it, and the project has spent a certain number of years in the industry, or it has made a huge impact in the industry. Because once the project comes in, it's part of an incubator project, and then it takes some time to get them to be a flagship project. There are certain recommendations which we are building now to make sure that people who have spent even if 6 months and the project is making huge impact, then it should become a flagship project. Like right now, we have some wonderful projects from ZAP, which is Z Attack Proxy, which is very well used in the testing and development ecosystem now, to OWASP Top 10, which is more of a guide to people or guide to organization to have those top 10 issues, to OWASP application security verification standard, which talks about like a huge checklist of the verification standard which an organization can do from level 0 to level 3.
So I guess that there's some formality there in any case, right? Like there's a it's not just a random word. This actually means something. It has import. If a project has been granted flagship status. That means there's broad industry support. That means there's going to be a level of adoption and hopefully life cycle management there. I guess what I'm driving at is if you're an organization and your risk profile doesn't necessarily include rando software you found on the internet, when you look at OWASP and you see the word flagship, there's a certain level of trust you can have there. Is that correct?
I would say yes, absolutely, that's correct. People trust OWASP, and people take it very seriously, especially now. OWASP Top 10 has just recently come out, the new one. So you have like people are actually following it, talking about it, because when we talk about the open source component of it, it comes up with a huge amount of information with it. It's not just like the top 10 list that they have shared, but underlying issues, underlying CVEs, which are like common vulnerability exposure, like the CV, how severe that is as a vulnerability. And on top of it, what are the associated risks with it? So if I have to talk about a WASP top 10, I can say that those are the top 10 risks which have underlying many risks. But then those are the things that organizations should for sure consider, that I can say.
Right. So you mentioned the top 10. So for anybody in the audience who's not familiar, OWASP publishes sort of the top 10. Right. So what are the common things to be looking out for? What are the vulnerabilities that are not necessarily the most dangerous, but you know what? I'll let Vandana answer rather. How is that top 10 compiled? What is the nature of the top 10, and what is the relevance of the top 10 to organizations today?
While I talk about top 10 compilation, there are so many factors that have been taken into consideration. And when the data comes, data doesn't come from one source. It comes from multiple companies to open source communities, and then inputs being taken from multiple sources. Now, when that data comes in, there is data analytics that's been taken on with those, like that's huge amount of data. And after that, it's being shared with the community for the feedback. Okay, these are the top 10 risks that have come up from different organizations, different researchers, different people. And when the community responds, okay, they vote upon certain vulnerabilities, they share their inputs, they share their feedback, then it's published finally for everyone. Like it's a draft version that comes up first, taken into all the opinion, all the inputs. And if you look at this year top 10, there are many researchers who are listed on the top 10 list, like over 20, 30, you will find them. Now, why we say that? Because they have contributed to the OWASP top 10 in bringing it to what it is, like talking about their remediation, talking about what exactly that vulnerability is all about, and how exactly you can proactively mitigate it, or you can fix it, or what are the ways to remediate it if it's there in your environment, or how you can actually track it. So it's very, very important. And so it comes up with all of those things as a package. So while research is going on, that research comes into picture, the data comes into picture, it's being analyzed. After the analysis, it's being shared with the people to vote upon members and the whole community, and then after that it's being published. That's the whole process.
Well, it's an important thing that you mentioned there, which is that it's a complete process, and it's not just about the scary parts, right? It's not just about saying, "Oh, here are the things you got to look out for," and be afraid, right? It is that this is an analysis of sort of the security landscape. And yes, there's stuff in here that you should be concerned with because, frankly, it is scary. Here's what you need to know, as you said, to remediate it, to deal with it. And one of the things I really like about the OWASP community is that it is a community, right? You're not there on your own. You're not alone. If you have questions, if you need more information, the community is there for you. All right, so we are bumping up against time. I would like to thank, first off, you, Vandana, for taking the time out to work on this talk, for sharing your knowledge and your experience with us and with the community here today. Again, it's been an honor and a pleasure to work with you on this. I'd also like to thank our audience for their excellent questions. It's always good to see questions from the audience, helps us drive the discussion in fun and interesting ways. And as Vandana said, if you'd like to get a hold of her, she has a number of ways to do it. We will be making all of these talks available afterwards if you missed something, so you'll be able to watch this on the replay. Thank you again, Vandana, for taking the time out with us today. And to our audience and everyone else, we'll see you on the internet. Bye-bye, everybody.